Asterisk asterisk, a lighthouse that watches without asking asterisk asterisk. There is a place where nothing is in a hurry, far from cities, far from voices, far from the constant need to be somewhere else. There stands a lighthouse. It does not call attention to itself. It does not shine brighter than it needs to. It simply turns. Slowly, steadily, again and again. The sea around it is quiet, not empty, just calm. The waves do not crash. They arrive gently, as if they have learned that there is no reason to rush. Long ago, a man came to live there. His name was Elias. He did not arrive with plans. He did not arrive with answers. He only arrived because he no longer wanted noise. He had lived in a city once, a place full of movement, full of voices, full of clocks that never stopped. And at first it felt normal, but over time, something inside him grew tired, not of people, not of life, just of speed. So one day, he left, quietly, without explaining, without saying goodbye to more than he needed to, and somehow, step by step, without really knowing how, he found the lighthouse. The first night felt different. Silence there was not empty. It had weight. It stayed. It filled the space around him and inside him. He lit a small fire, sat near the window, watched the sea, and for the first time in a long while, nothing was asking anything from him. Above him, the light turned, slowly, steadily, without pause. At first he noticed every second, every small sound, every shift in the wind, but after a while, he stopped noticing the silence and began to become part of it. Days passed, or maybe they didn't. Time felt softer there, less sharp, less demanding. He stopped checking the broken watch in his pocket. It didn't matter anymore. Morning came when it came. Night arrived when it was ready, and that was enough. Each day became simple. Wake, boil water, sit, watch, breathe. Sometimes birds would visit. They landed near the railing, quiet, observing, and afraid. Elias would leave small pieces of bread, not as a habit, not as a routine, just as something that felt right. No words were needed, no understanding required, just presence. At night, the fire would glow softly, the lighthouse would turn above, and the sea would continue its slow, endless movement. And Elias would sit there, not thinking too much, not searching for meaning, just listening. One evening, something changed. The sea became still, not calm, not silent, just still in a different way, as if it was waiting. Elias leaned closer to the window. There was something beneath the surface, not clear, not defined, just a movement that did not belong to the waves. It passed slowly, without sound, without disturbance. And then, it was gone. The sea returned. The rhythm continued. Elias did not follow it. He did not question it. Some things did not need to be understood. Time moved again, or maybe it never stopped. Seasons passed. Cold air came. Then warmth returned. Storms arrived and left again. But the lighthouse remained, unchanged, unbothered, steady. Elias changed too, but not in the way people usually do. He became quieter, not outside, inside. The need to think lessened. The need to decide faded. The need to rush disappeared completely. And something else took its place. Not happiness, not excitement, just a quiet kind of balance. The kind that does not rise, and does not fall. Sometimes at night, when the fire had almost faded, and the light above continued its slow turning, Elias would close his eyes. Not to sleep, not yet. Just to feel the rhythm. The light turning, the sea moving, the air resting. Everything together, like breathing. In and out, in and out. Nothing more. One night, he dreamed of the city again, but it was different. The streets were empty, the lights were dim, the noise was gone, and for the first time, it felt peaceful. When he woke, he did not miss it. He did not miss anything. The lighthouse was enough, the sea was enough, the quiet was enough, and still, the light continued, turning, without asking, without stopping, without needing to be noticed. Some nights, the horizon disappeared into darkness. Other nights, the stars reflected softly on the water. But nothing changed the rhythm. And slowly, without effort, without intention, Elias became part of it. Not separate, not watching, just there. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the world kept moving fast. But here, nothing needed to. The sea moved slowly, the light turned steadily, and the silence remained full, not empty, never empty, just waiting, as if there was always something more, just beneath the surface, not yet seen, not yet understood, but always there. Asterisk asterisk, the lighthouse that watches without asking. Asterisk asterisk. Asterisk asterisk, part 2, the sound beneath the water. Asterisk asterisk. There are places that begin to reveal themselves slowly, not all at once, not in ways you can clearly understand, but in small moments that stay with you longer than they should. Elias had been in the lighthouse for a long time now, long enough that the world he came from no longer felt real. The sea had become familiar, the light above him predictable, the silence comfortable. But something had changed, not outside, inside the rhythm. At first it was easy to ignore. A feeling, a pause, a shift so small it could be mistaken for nothing. Then one night, he heard it. A sound. Not from the wind, not from the lighthouse, from beneath the water. It was not loud, not sharp, not something that demanded attention. It was low, deep, almost like a distant echo, moving slowly through something vast. Elias did not move at first. He simply listened. The sound came, and then it faded. Just like that. The sea returned to normal. The waves moved gently. The light continued to turn. Everything, as it always had been. And yet, something had stayed. The next day felt the same. Calm, quiet, unchanged. But Elias noticed something new. The birds did not come. The railing outside remained empty. No movement. No small sounds. Just stillness. He stepped outside. The air felt the same. The sea looked the same. But there was an absence. A subtle one. As if something had shifted, just slightly out of place. That night, he waited. Not in anticipation. Not in fear. Just aware. The fire burned low. The light above turned. And then it came again. The sound. Deeper this time. Longer. Not a single tone, but something layered, as if more than one movement existed beneath the surface. Elias closed his eyes. Not to block it out, but to feel it more clearly. The sound did not feel distant anymore. It felt close. Not near the lighthouse, but connected to it, as if the water itself was carrying something that did not belong to the surface. When he opened his eyes, the sea had changed again, still calm, still quiet, but darker, not in colour, in depth. The surface no longer reflected light the same way, it absorbed it. Adair stepped closer to the edge. The water did not move away from him. It did not react. It simply remained. Then, just for a moment, he saw it. Not clearly, not fully, but enough. A shape, far below, moving slowly, not like a fish, not like anything he had seen before. It did not break the surface. It did not rush. It simply passed beneath the lighthouse, as if it had always been there. And then it was gone again. Liz did not step back. He did not call out. There was no fear. Only understanding. Not understanding of what it was, but understanding that it did not need to be named. The following days became quieter, even quieter than before. The birds did not return. The wind softened. Even the waves seemed to slow further. Time stretched. Moments lasted longer. The turning light above felt heavier, not slower, just deeper. The ears began to notice something else. The sound was not random. It followed a pattern. Not exact, not mechanical, but rhythmic, like breathing, like the sea itself, was alive in a way it had not been before. At night, he would sit in the same place, listen, feel. A sound would come, then go, then return again. Each time, slightly closer, not approaching, but revealing, as if something was not moving toward him, but becoming more visible to him. One evening, as the sky turned soft and grey, Elias remained by the window longer than usual. The light above continued its endless turning, and the sea waited. Then the sound came again, stronger now, not loud, but full. Elias placed his hand gently against the glass. The vibration was faint, but real. The lighthouse felt it. Not shaking, not moving, just aware. For the first time, Elias understood something. The lighthouse was not just watching the sea. It was listening. And perhaps it always had been. That night, he did not sleep immediately. He sat, eyes closed, breathing slowly. The sound continued beneath him. Not disturbing, not threatening, just present, like something ancient, something patient, something that did not belong to time. And as the light turned above him, and the sea moved below, Leos felt something shift again. Not outside, inside, as if he was no longer just observing the rhythm, but becoming part of something larger. Something that had always been there, waiting, not to be found, but to be noticed. And somewhere, far below the surface, the movement continued. Slow, steady, unseen, but no longer unknown. Asterisk, the lighthouse that watches without asking, asterisk. Part 3, the room beneath the lantern, asterisk. There are some places that do not reveal their deepest truths quickly. They wait, not because they are hiding, but because they belong to a slower kind of knowing. The lighthouse had always been like that. It had never explained itself. It had never needed to. It stood where the rock met the sea, where wind crossed open water and lost its sharpness before reaching the stone walls, where the light turned through the dark not as a warning alone, but as a rhythm older than routine. The layers had lived there long enough to understand that most things in the place came in layers. First the silence, then the calm, then the subtle feeling that the calm was not emptiness, but presence, then the sound beneath the water, then the shape beneath the surface. And now, as autumn moved gently toward winter, and the air around the tower grew cooler in the late hours of evening, he began to sense that there was something else. Not in the sea this time, inside the lighthouse itself. It came first as a feeling in the stairs. He noticed it one night while climbing from the lower room back toward the lantern chamber after checking the old brass fittings near the middle landing. His hand rested on the rail. The wood was smooth with age. The stone walls held the days cold in silence. Then halfway up he stopped, not because he heard a sound, because he felt a difference, a faint warmth, not around him, below him, as if somewhere deeper in the tower, behind stone and narrow walls and old sealed passages, something held a quiet heat of its own. It lasted only a moment. Then it was gone. The Luz remained still on the step for several breaths. Above him, the light continued its slow turning. Below him, the lower room sat in darkness, except for the glow from the stove he had left hours earlier. He looked down into the spiral. Nothing moved. Nothing waited. And yet he knew with the simple certainty of a man who has lived long enough with stillness to recognize the smallest change inside it. The lighthouse had answered something. Or perhaps something inside it had woken. He did not rush to investigate. That was not his way anymore. There had been a time, in the life he rarely thought about now, when unfamiliar things would have immediately become problems to solve. A sound had to be identified. A movement had to be explained. An uncertainty had to be reduced until it became ordinary. But the sea had changed that in him. The lighthouse had changed that even more. He had learned that not every unanswered thing was dangerous. Some were simply unfinished. And so he returned to his chair by the window that night, added one small piece of wood to the stove, and sat with his hands resting loosely on the arms of the chair while the fire breathed softly in the iron belly of the stove. Outside, the sea was dark. Not harshly dark. Not storm dark. Just deep. The kind of darkness that feels full rather than empty, as if beneath the surface there is more shape, more motion, more memory than the eye can ever hold. A low sound came again near midnight. He no longer startled when he heard it. It had become part of the place. A low, loud resonance moving beneath the water and through the rock below the lighthouse, too slow to feel like machinery, too natural to feel artificial, too consistent to be imagination. This time he noticed something new. When the sound rose from the sea, the warmth in the stairs returned. A subtle line of heat moving upward through the tower. Not enough to change the air. Just enough to be felt by someone who had grown used to every usual temperature in every room. Liz closed his eyes and listened. The sound below, the turning lamp above, the soft settling of fire near the wall. 3 rhythms, separate, connected. He stayed there until the sound faded again, and when he finally slept, he dreamed not of cities or streets or distant forgotten windows, but of the lighthouse standing alone in a world of water without horizon, its beam circling across mist, revealing nothing and everything at once. In the dream, there was a door at the base of the tower. A door he had never seen. Old wood. Iron hinges. Salt worn into the grain. No lock. Only a ring of black metal in the center. He did not open it in the dream. He only stood before it while the sea breathed slowly all around him, and felt the same certainty he had felt on the stairs. There is more here. When he woke, dawn had not yet arrived. The lantern above was still turning. The room was cold enough that his first breath carried faint white into the darkness. He sat upright, slowly listening. The sea was quiet. The sound beneath it had gone. The warmth in the stairs was gone too. Only the ordinary silence remained. Yet the dream did not leave him the way most dreams do. It stayed, sharp in shape, soft in feeling. He rose, wrapped his coat around his shoulders, and lit the small lamp on the table. Its circle of gold moved across the room as he carried it toward the bottom of the stair. The lighthouse had 3 rooms he thought of as living spaces, though in truth they were little more than stone chambers joined by a spiral of age-polished steps. The lower room held crates, tools, water barrels, coils of rope, and shelves with things left by keepers so long gone that even their names had worn out. Above that was the room where he slept and kept the stove and chair and books. Above that, the lantern chamber, with its metal ribs and thick glass and a great lens that turned like a patient eye through every night. He knew these rooms. He knew their dimensions, their draughts, their creaks, the places where damp gathered after hard weather and the places where dust rested untouched in the calmest weeks. He had never seen another door. Still, that morning before dawn, he took the lamp to the very bottom of the stairs and stood in the storage room longer than usual, moving the light slowly over the walls, stone, shelves, a narrow table, hooks with old oilcloths, a wooden chest with rusted corners, nothing more. And yet, when he lifted the lamp toward the far side of the room, behind 2 stacked crates and a coil of thick rope, he noticed that the wall there was not exactly like the others. The stones were older, darker. Their seams were less visible, not because they were better laid, because something had once been laid over them, or against them. He set the lamp on the table, moved the rope aside, and pushed one crate, then the other, until they scraped softly over the floor. Behind them was not a door, not clearly, but there was a shape in the stone. A narrow arch, bricked over long ago with material that did not quite match the surrounding wall. Elias stood in stillness, looking at it. The dream had not shown him this. Not exactly, but it had brought him here. He reached out and placed his palm against the center of the bricked arch. Cold, solid, old. Yet beneath the cold he felt it again. Not heat this time. A faint pulse of stored warmth, as if somewhere beyond the stone the lighthouse held a pocket of air untouched by the chill of the sea. He withdrew his hand and remained there a long while. A younger man might have taken tools to the wall that same morning, might have broken through in impatience, might have wanted discovery more than understanding. But the years in the tower had taught Elias to let things arrive in their own time. He moved the crates back into place, not to hide the arch from himself, only to leave it where it had waited all these years. Then he returned upstairs as the first grey of dawn softened the window and the sea became visible again, wide and patient and silver-black beneath the sky. The day passed in quiet routine. He boiled water, wiped the inside glass where a faint mist had gathered, checked the metal fittings on the lamp, read several pages from one of the old books he had brought from the city, though by the end of the reading he could not have said what the words were about, because his thoughts had returned again and again to the bricked arch below. He went outside briefly in the afternoon. The air had a clean coolness to it, and the horizon looked farther away than usual. No birds came. That absence no longer surprised him. The world around the lighthouse had been subtly changing ever since the sound beneath the sea began its slow return. The changes were never dramatic. They did not break anything. They simply shifted the atmosphere of the place, as if the lighthouse, the sea, and whatever moved beneath it were entering some older arrangement that the birds understood better than he did. By evening, clouds had gathered in long pale bands across the west. Not storm clouds, just enough to soften the sunset until the world lost its edges early. He lit the lamp, lit the stove, and waited. The sound beneath the water returned sooner that night, longer too. It moved through the stone below him like distant resonance through the body of an instrument too large to see. And once again, with it came the warmth in the stairs. This time Elias did not remain by the window. He took the small hand lamp and descended. The spiral staircase glowed in soft gold as he moved downward, each step holding a little more of its subtle warmth than the one above. At the bottom, he stood in the storage room and listened. The sound below the water was clear here. Not louder exactly, but less filtered. He moved the crates aside again, set down the lamp, pressed his hand to the bricked arch. Warm, not hot, just warm enough to feel impossible. He remained there until, quite suddenly, the sound ceased. The warmth vanished with it. The stones cooled beneath his hand as if whatever had stirred beyond them had gone back to sleep. He stood in darkness and lamplight, breathing slowly. Then, before he could decide whether he was disappointed or relieved, another sound came, not from the sea, From behind the wall itself, a faint settling, a soft interior shift like old timber easing under changed weight. Liz took one step back, then another. Nothing more happened. But from that moment, the arch was no longer only an arch. It was a closed thing with space beyond it. A place. A room. The thought moved with him through the rest of the night. A room beneath a lantern. The phrase formed on its own in his mind as he sat near the stove after midnight with no book in his lap and no wish to sleep. A room beneath the lantern. As if the tower had always contained more than it showed. As if the light that turned above every night had long been balanced by something hidden below, in darkness, in silence, in patient concealment. 3 nights passed before he touched the wall again. During those days the sea remained unusually calm. Even the usual low slap of water against the rock below the lighthouse seemed softened, as if the ocean itself had drawn one careful breath and was holding it. On the 3rd evening, the sky cleared completely. Stars appeared sharp and numerous before the night had fully deepened, and the lantern beam moved through them in slow white tucks that faded into distance. Elias felt a strange steadiness in himself, as though the days of waiting had not delayed anything but prepared it. He brought tools down after sunset, not heavy ones. Only a narrow hammer, an old iron chisel, and a brush. He moved the crates, set the lamp on the floor, and stood before the brick Dutch once more. The work was slower than he expected, not because the old material was hard, but because each strike sounded louder than it should have in the enclosed room, and each small piece that broke away felt like the lifting of something that had wanted to remain sealed. He worked gently, not with fear of what was behind the wall, but with respect for the age of it. Dusk gathered. Fine fragments fell. The smell that emerged was not rot, not damp decay, not trapped seawater. It was old air, still air. Air that had not moved in many years. When the opening was finally wide enough for the lamp to shine through, he stopped. Beyond the broken bricks lay darkness and a short stone passage descending 3 shallow steps. Nothing else visible. He widened the gap enough to pass through and then stood there, the lamp trembling only slightly in his hand, though he did not feel afraid. What he felt was stranger than fear. Recognition. As if some quiet part of him had been expecting this long before the first dream, long before the first warmth in this days, perhaps even before he had come to the lighthouse at all. He stepped through. The passage was narrow. Its walls were rougher than the tower above, older perhaps, or simply less finished. The air inside was cool but not cold. Dry. Still. After 3 shallow steps, a passage opened into a circular chamber set within the base of the tower, smaller than the room above it, lower in ceiling, and almost completely empty. There was a table of dark wood against one wall, a single chair, a built-in shelf cut into the stone, and at the center of the room, directly beneath where the lantern would stand many floors above, a round metal plate was set into the floor, about the width of a large basin, engraved with concentric circles and fine marks worn soft with age. Liz lifted the lamp higher. Dust lay over everything, but not thickly. This was no ruin. It felt preserved, held outside ordinary time. On the table lay a ledger bound in cracked leather. Beside it, a brass key. No lock was visible anywhere in the room. He set the lamp down and approached the table first. The ledger resisted when he opened it, then yielded with the slow stiffness of old paper. The first pages were blank. 9 names appeared. Dates. Short entries. Not many words. The handwriting changed over the decades, but the rhythm of the writing did not. Kept the light through hard fog. Sea quiet tonight. Heard the sound again under the eastern rock. No birds this morning. Warmth in the lower stairs after midnight. Did not open the chamber. Open the chamber. It is listening. Elias stood very still. He turned more pages. The names went back farther than he expected. Farther than his own arrival by many years. Farther even than the modern fittings of the lantern, farther than the repainting of the outer walls, farther into a history of keepers who had come, lived, listened, written, and gone. Some entries were practical. Oil low, weather clear, lens cleaned, wind high. Others were less so. The sound stayed until dawn. Dreamed of the sea below the sea. The room grew warm for 3 nights in succession. Do not answer the water too quickly. Wait when it waits. That line held him longer than the rest. Do not answer the water too quickly. He turned another page, then another. Near the middle of the ledger, written in steadier, darker script than most, he found a longer entry. The room beneath the light is not a machine room, nor a store, nor a place of repair. It is older than the current tower and was preserved when the present walls were raised around the original foundation. The sea answers here, or rather, something within the sea does. The first keepers believed it to be a current of stone and water. Later ones used other names. None were sufficient. We keep the light above because the turning steadies the answer below. So long as the rhythm is maintained, the sea remains calm around the rock. When the answer grows strong, the keeper must listen, but never force. There are nights when the water seeks reply. On those nights the chamber will warm. Deleuze read the passage twice, then once more. He became aware of the room around him again, the stone, the circular floor plate, the impossible stillness. The sea remains calm around the rock. The thought moved through him with quiet force. Was the lighthouse only a guide for ships? Or had it always been something else as well? A marker. A keeper. A rhythm maintained between light and water. He looked at the brass key on the table. Still no lock was visible, only the circular plate in the floor. He approached it now, kneeling slowly to bring the lamp closer. The engraved marks were not random. Some resembled numbers, others directional lines. Others still might have been only decorative, though in this room nothing felt decorative. At the center of the plate was a keyhole, so finely fitted, so dark with age, that from standing height he had not seen it at all. He sat back on his heels. The warmth in the stairs had not come that night. The sound from the sea had not yet risen. Only the room waited. And on the table behind him, the key waited too. He did not use it. Not that night. Instead he returned to the ledger and read until the lamp burned low. The entries did not provide simple answers. They circled, repeated, suggested. One keeper wrote of hearing voices in the water, though the next called that keeper prone to imagination and wrote only of tones and pressure in the stone. One wrote that the chamber below responded best on cloudless nights after long still weather. Another warned that storms could follow if the turning of the light above faltered. One entry, written in hurried hand and never continued, read only, "I thought it wanted entry, but now I think it wants witness." That line stayed with Deleuze as he finally left the hidden room and sealed the opening only loosely with the moved crates. He slept little that night, not from fear, from depth. Some discoveries do not excite the mind into wakefulness. They quiet it so completely that sleep feels too shallow a place to put them. Morning came pale and slow. He stood outside with his coat drawn around him and looked over the water. The sea was flat as polished stone. There was no wind. The horizon dissolved into a brightness almost white. He thought of all the keepers before him. Men perhaps, and maybe women too, though most names in the ledger were only initials. Each had come to the tower believing perhaps they were accepting solitude, duty, weather, maintenance, a life paid down to essentials. And then, little by little, each had discovered the second duty hidden inside the first. Listen. Wait. Maintain the rhythm. Do not answer too quickly. What did answering mean? He did not yet know. By late afternoon the air had changed. Not colder, closer, as if the world around the lighthouse had drawn in around itself, narrowing the distance between sea and tower. The first sound came before dusk, low, steady, long enough that he felt it through the soles of his feet even in the room above. He descended at once. This time the warmth in the stairs was unmistakable. The hidden room beyond the wall held a quiet living heat. Deleuze set the lamp inside, opened the ledger to the marked page, and read one short instruction written in neat, deliberate script at the margin of a much older entry. When the warmth and the sound arrive together, remain in the chamber and keep the hand above the center until the answer passes. He looked from the page to the floor plate. The key still rested on the table. The keyhole waited, but the instruction mentioned only the hand above the center, not the key. He knelt before the metal plate and hovered his palm over it. At first, nothing. Then the sound deepened beneath the room. The circles engraved in the plate seemed to hold the vibration and spread it outward through the chamber floor. A faint light appeared, not from the plate itself, but from within the ring around it, like moonlight seen through very deep water. Elias did not move. The warmth rose around his hand. Not burning, not painful, almost like the warmth of sunlight on stone after a cold morning. The sound below shifted slowly in tone. For one long moment he had the impossible sensation that something vast lay directly beneath the metal plate, not physically, not near an ordinary space, but aligned with it, waiting below layers of depth no human body could descend through. His breathing slowed. The room seemed larger. The sea outside the tower disappeared from awareness. There was only the turning light far above, the hidden chamber around him, and the answering depth below. Then, through the warmth against his palm, a feeling, not words, not images exactly, but something close to memory not his own passed into him. Dark water, immense quiet, the underside of waves seen from below, not frightening, not lonely, endless and patient and older than any shore. He saw, or felt, the lighthouse from beneath the sea as if its stone foundation reached deeper than rock should allow, like a route of light ascending into black water. Then came another sensation, recognition, not of him as Elias, of the keeper. A role, not a person. The chamber did not know his past. The sea did not ask his name. It knew only whether the rhythm above remained steady, whether the light still turned, whether someone listened. Tears came to Elias's eyes without distress. The feeling was too large for ordinary emotion. Not joy, not sorrow. Something quieter and deeper than both. Belonging without possession. Witness without control. The warmth faded first. Then the low sound beneath the plate softened and moved away. Back beneath the sea, back beneath the rock. The faint ring of light around the metal center vanished. The chamber cooled. Elias remained kneeling long after it ended. At last he sat back, hands resting on his knees. The key on the table caught the lamp glow. He knew now that it had not been meant for this moment. Perhaps not for him at all. The chamber had answered without being opened further. Whatever lay below did not need entry. It needed steadiness. It needed the turning of the lantern. It needed someone to remain. That night, for the first time since coming to the lighthouse, Elias understood his solitude differently. He had once believed he came there to leave something behind. Noise, urgency, exhaustion, a life that moved too fast. But perhaps he had also been coming towards something. Something he could not have named while still surrounded by clocks and voices. A place where listening mattered more than speaking. Where maintenance was a form of care. Where light was not performance but continuity. The days that followed became deeper, not stranger. The sea sound returned on some nights and not on others. When warmth rose through the stairs and chamber, Elias would go below, open the ledger to the instruction, and rest his hand above the center until the answer passed. He never used the key. He no longer felt the need to. Sometimes, while kneeling there, he sensed movement far below, slow and enormous, less like creatures and more like currents carrying memory through the dark. Sometimes he felt nothing but calm. Once he thought he heard, not in the room but inside himself, a phrase with no voice attached to it. Still here. He did not know whether the words came from the place, from his own thoughts, or from the soft merging of the two. But he wrote them in the ledger afterward beneath his name and date. Still here. Winter came. Not violently. Snow arrived in thin veils some mornings, whitening the rock and the narrow ledges before melting by noon. The sea darkened, but rarely raged. The air grew clean and sharp. Nights lengthened. Inside the lighthouse, the fire burned longer each evening. The lamp above continued its turning without complaint. The hidden chamber below remained dry, still, and waiting. Elias began reading the older ledger entries aloud sometimes, softly, while seated in the secret room after an answering had passed. Not because anyone needed to hear them. Perhaps because he felt the former keepers more clearly there. Not as ghosts. Not as presences. But as continuity. A line of quiet lives joined by the same duty, each leaving a few words for the next and asking to be remembered beyond the work itself. He found comfort in that. The world beyond the sea valued names, accomplishments, ownership, visible traces. The lighthouse valued maintenance, steadiness, to keep the beam turning, to answer when the sea answered, to write only enough for the next pair of hands. In deep winter he climbed to the lantern room one night during clear cold weather and looked outward for a long time while the beam swept across black water and distant stars. The whole world seemed reduced to essentials: glass, light, sea, darkness, red. He placed his hand on the metal frame of the lens as it turned. Smooth, steady, patient. He understood then why the chamber below sat directly beneath the lantern. The tower was not divided into above and below. It was one instrument, light turning over darkness, depth answering beneath height, the keeper standing between them. That understanding changed his last uncertainty. He no longer wondered whether he should remain in the lighthouse for the rest of his life. He knew he would, not from resignation, not because there was nowhere else to go, because staying had become an answer of its own. Spring returned so gradually that he noticed that only when one morning he heard a single bird land at the railing outside the window, then another, then, a few days later, three at once, tilting their heads toward the glass before lifting into the air again. The sea sound came less often for a time. The warmth in the stairs slept. The hidden chamber rested. The world above resumed a gentler, ordinary cycle. Elias began writing more regularly in the ledger. Not many words. Just enough. Light steady through clear weather. No answer from the chamber this week. Birds returned with spring. The sea calm. And later, the answer came after midnight. Warm strong. No disturbance after. Felt only stillness. And later still. I believe the sea does not seek command. Only witness. The tower is a promise of return. That entry seemed true to him in a way the others had not yet quite reached. The tower is a promise of return. Light circles. Darkness comes back. The beam comes back too. Waves leave. Waves return. The deep answer fades. Then returns in its time. Perhaps that was why the place suited him so completely. Nothing there demanded permanence. Only continuity. One summer evening, long after he had found the hidden chamber, a small boat appeared on the horizon. It moved slowly, uncertainly, as if the person inside did not know exactly where they were going but had trusted the sight of the lighthouse enough to continue. Elias watched from the outer platform while the boat came near enough for him to see that its passenger was young, perhaps not much older than he himself had been when he first reached the tower. The young man tied the boat awkwardly at the sheltered side of the rock and climbed up, carrying a satchel and weariness in his shoulders. When Elias opened the door, the visitor looked surprised, perhaps to find anyone there at all. I thought, the young man began, then smiled faintly, embarrassed. I'm not sure what I thought. Elias stepped aside and let him in. The young man's name was Thomas. He had been travelling the coast for work that had not worked out, moving from town to town, taking temporary repairs, odd jobs, loading boats, fixing shutters, copying inventories for merchants. Nothing that held. Storm weather earlier in the week had driven him into the wrong current, and by the time he regained direction, the lighthouse was the nearest refuge. He stayed one night, then two, then, after the weather turned rough again, a week. He helped with small tasks, carried water, cleaned soup from the stovepipe, asked few questions at first. The questions came later. Does it never feel too quiet here? Elias considered before answering. It used to, he said. Then it began to feel accurate. Thomas looked at him for a moment and laughed softly, not because the answer was amusing, but because it felt strange in a way he could not dismiss. Days passed. Thomas spoke little of his life before the lighthouse, and Elias did not ask much. He had learned that people reveal what they need to reveal when silence around them is not hostile. One night the sea answered while Thomas was there. The warmth rose through the stairs. The low resonance moved beneath the tower. Elias stood from his chair before the window and saw at once that Thomas had felt it too. The young man had gone very still. What is that? He asked. Elias held his gaze for a moment, then answered with the truth he could offer. The sea remembering the tower, he said. Thomas frowned slightly, as if unsure whether he had misheard, but he did not mock the answer. He only listened. Does it happen often? Sometimes. What do you do? I listened back. Thomas might have asked more, but something in Eliza's face, or perhaps in the depth of the sound itself, stopped him. "May I stay here?" he asked instead. Eliza nodded toward the chair. "Yes." They sat together in silence as the sound moved below the rock. Elias did not take Thomas into the hidden chamber that night. Not yet. Some things are not kept secret because they are forbidden, only because they need time. Thomas remained through the end of summer. By then, he had become part of the rhythm of the place without effort. He learned the lamp maintenance, the cleaning of the glass, the small repairs to hinges and railings, the measured way Elias moved through each day. Never hurried, never idle. He also learned the silences, the difference between ordinary sea quiet and the deeper stillness before an answering, the difference between wind around the tower and warmth in the stairs. On the first night Elias took him into the hidden chamber, the young man said nothing at all for a long time after seeing the ledger, the floor plate, the old table. He only stood in the center of the room while the lamp flame moved gently beside him and the walls held the ancient calm. At last he asked very quietly, "How long has this been here?" "Longer than I know," Elias said. "Longer than the lighthouse." "Maybe longer than what people call the lighthouse." Thomas turned slowly, taking in the chamber once more. "And what is it?" Elias smiled faintly. "If you stay long enough, you may stop needing the question." The young man considered this without irritation. Then his eyes found the ledger. "And if I stay?" Then one day, Elias said, "You will write in it." Autumn returned. Then winter. Then another spring. Time continued in widening circles. There were years after that, though Elias no longer counted them sharply. Thomas came and went only once, in early summer of the second year, sailing to the mainland for supplies and returning with flour, oil, tea, paper, and 2 new books. Neither of them ended up reading very much. After that, he remained, not because he had nowhere else to go, because he too had begun to understand the accuracy of quiet. The lighthouse needed no declaration from either of them. It absorbed their days the way the sea absorbed moonlight completely, without noise. Elias grew older. The change was gentle, then visible. His hands became thinner. The stairs took him longer. Sometimes Thomas climbed to the lantern chamber before he asked, and often before he needed to. The hidden chamber answered less often in those later years, but more deeply when it did. On one such night, when Eliza's hair had gone fully white and the sea sound had returned after many quiet weeks, he went below with Thomas beside him. They knelt together in the chamber. Elias rested his hand above the plate first, then moved it aside. Thomas placed his own hand over the center. The warmth rose immediately, stronger than either had felt in months. A faint ring of underwater light formed around the plate. The sound deepened through the rock. Elias watched Thomas's face change, not in fear, not in shock, but in recognition, the same recognition he himself had once felt. The sea does not ask your name, only whether you listen. When the answer passed and the chamber cooled again, Thomas remained kneeling, eyes wet, breathing slowly. At last he whispered, "It knows." Elias rested one old hand lightly on his shoulder. "Yes," he said. "Not you, not me, only the place we keep." Years later, on a morning when the sea was perfectly still and the sky held the pale quiet of early spring, Elias did not rise from his chair by the window. The lantern above had already been tended before dawn. The stove held only embers. His hands rested lightly in his lap. His face was turned toward the sea as if he had been listening when sleep reached him and simply continued listening on the other side of it. Thomas found him there as the first full sunlight entered the room. He stood in silence for a long time, not broken by grief, held by it. Outside, the water moved with soft silver calm around the rock. Above, the light had gone still with day, waiting for night to call it back into motion. Below, in the hidden chamber, the ledger waited. Thomas buried Elias on the higher edge of the rock where thin grass grew between stones and where the sea could be seen from every angle. There was no cemetery there, only the tower, the shoreless horizon, and the place he chose. He marked the grave simply. No full name, only asterisk for Liz asterisk kept the light asterisk. That night, when darkness returned and the lantern began turning again under Thomas's hands, the sea answered, warmer than ever before, deeper, Longer. He went down into the hidden chamber, carrying the lamp, and opened the ledger to a new page. For some time he could not write. At last, in a careful, handmade, and steady, not by uncertainty, but by feeling too large for easy language, he wrote. He listened well. The light remained steady. I am here. Then he rested his hand above the center plate. The warmth rose. The ring of dim underwater light formed. The sound moved below, carrying the same vast patience it always had, and through it came not words, not exactly, but something like the calm impression of a wave arriving where it has arrived 1,000 times before. Not ending. Returning. Thomas bowed his head. When the answer passed, he closed the ledger gently, and remained in the chamber a while longer, listening to the cooling stone, the quiet tower above, and the sea beyond the walls. The years ahead would be his now. The stairs, the lamp, the fire, the waiting, the answering, the simple dariness of keeping something alive not by controlling it, but by remaining faithful to its rhythm. Outside the lighthouse, the world would continue in its usual way. Cities would hurry, ships would pass. Lives would fill themselves with clocks, noise, decisions, arrivals, departures. Most would never know what stood beneath the lantern or what the sea sometimes said to the stone. That was all right. The deepest things do not always ask to be known widely, only kept. And so the lighthouse continued. Night after night, the beam turned across the dark sea, round and round, again and again. Below, beneath rock and water and silence, the old answer continued to, not every night, not for everyone, but often enough to remind the one who listened that the world is fuller than it appears when looked at too quickly. Sometimes Thomas would stand at the outer rail just before dawn and think of Liz in the chair, facing the water. Sometimes he would hear a single bird land near the window and remember the quiet mornings of years before. Sometimes the hidden chamber would sleep for weeks, and sometimes warmth would rise 3 nights in a row. And each time he would go down with the lamp, rest his hand above the center, wait until the answer passed, then write only enough. The sea calmed tonight. The warmth returned after midnight. Stars very clear. Felt no fear. Light steady. In this way the ledger continued. A line unbroken. A human thread passing through a place larger than any one human life. And if, in some future year, another traveller should come by chance or by slow invisible calling to the rock where the lighthouse stands, tired of speed, tired of noise, caring little, asking for shelter, perhaps Thomas too would step aside at the door. Perhaps another quiet life would begin in the turning of the light. Perhaps another hand would one day rest over the center plate in the room beneath the lantern. Because some stories do not end by closing. They end by continuing in someone else. Still, there are nights when the sea grows very still around the rock. Nights when the stars hang low and clear and the beam of the lantern seems to move not through darkness but through depth itself. On those nights, if you could stand far out in the water and look back toward the lighthouse, you might feel something difficult to name. Not fear, not even mystery exactly. Something softer. The sense that the tower is not alone. That beneath its light, and beneath the patient breathing of the sea, there remains an old conversation still taking place in silence. A conversation between height and depth, between witness and waiting, between what shines above the water and what remembers below. And perhaps that is why places like this help the restless heart grow calm, because they ask so little. Only presence, only patience, only the willingness to let the next wave arrive without forcing the sea to explain itself. The lighthouse does not demand, it turns. The sea does not confess, it answers. The keeper does not master either one, he remains. And in that remaining, something rare is preserved. A rhythm, a promise, a quiet. So if tonight the world around you still feels too fast, if the noise of ordinary life lingers a little longer than you want it to, if your thoughts keep moving in circles that feel sharper than sleep, then imagine the tower. Imagine the stone stairs cooling after midnight. Imagine the low fire in the room above. Imagine the hidden chamber below. Imagine the sea, dark and patient, moving beneath a sky full of cold stars. Imagine the lantern turning, slowly, steadily. again and again, and somewhere below the reach of sight, something ancient answering back not with words, but with calm. Let the beam pass over the water. Let it return. Let the waves arrive without effort. Let the silence fill, not empty. There is nothing to solve here, nothing to chase. Only a place where the light keeps turning, and the sea keeps listening. And now, as this final part comes gently to rest, let the tower remain in your mind a little longer. Let the fire soften. Let the stairs go quiet. Let the lantern make one more slow circle through the dark. If this story carried you somewhere calmer tonight, stay with that feeling. And if you'd like to keep walking through more quiet places like this with me, through old towers, silent shores, hidden rooms, and slow, dreamlike worlds, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment to let me know you were here. For now, the sea is calm, the light is steady,